Good morning. And I want to thank all of you for coming and for being here this morning on this very, very important topic and day. This press conference is to announce the introduction of a first-of-its-kind state law. Law enforcement is charged with protecting and serving all communities. At times, the use of deadly force is used at a terrible cost to all that's involved. We need to ensure that our state policy governing the use of deadly force stresses the sanctity of human life and is only used when necessary. I want to acknowledge my colleagues here who are standing here with me at this time. I am Assemblymember Shirley Weber from the 79th Assembly District and the Vice Chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. We have with us today, in terms of my colleagues, Matt Gibson, who represents, he'll tell me his district, your number?
64. District
64 in the LA area. Our president of our California Legislative Black Caucus, Chris Hogan from District 41. We have with us Mr. Bradford, Senator Bradford, who is from District 35. And my I won't say co-conspirator, but really my joint author, but sometimes co-conspirator, who's here with me today, Mr. McCarty, who represents the 7th District, which is here in Sacramento. We have been deeply saddened and frustrated by the killing of black and brown men by law enforcement. It seems that the worst possible outcome is increasingly the only outcome that we experience. But the public's activism in the last few weeks and their energy has truly been inspiring. It is time now that we as legislators match that energy and do the right thing by pushing for smart and effective reform. In 2016, the Policy Executive Research Forum released their guiding principles on the use of force. This is an organization comprised of leadership in law enforcement. Their 30 guiding principles stress the sanctity of human life, the need to adopt de-escalation as a formal agency policy, and the importance of agencies adopting policies that hold themselves to a higher standard than current legal requirements. This bill today, that is co-authored by myself and Mr. McCarty, is introducing what reflects these principles. This policy authorizes police officers to use deadly force only when it is necessary to prevent imminent and serious bodily injury or death. That is, if given the totality of the circumstances, there is no reasonable alternative to using deadly force, which is including warning, verbal, persuasion, or other non-lethal methods or resolutions or de-escalation. We're not saying that law enforcement officers can never use deadly force. I want to stress that. Deadly force can be used, but only when it is completely necessary. I would like to welcome my colleague, Assemblymember Kevin McCarty, who is a joint author on this bill, to have a few words to say. Mr. McCarty.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Weber, for your leadership, for stepping up. Certainly, I'm proud to join you as a joint author of this important legislation. Proud to partner with our sponsors. Some are here today. I know we have a few, but I want to mention ACLU and Black Lives Matter California and Sacramento. You know, the time is to act now. The nation is watching, the world is watching right here in Sacramento. We have these incidents too often in our great country, but we had one unnecessary killing right here in our own backyard in my hometown of Sacramento. It saddens me to see the attention on our hometown, but also inspires me that it's time to act here in California. Too many people ask, how can a kid with a cell phone in his family's backyard be shot to death in the back by a law enforcement officer when they see examples of the 3,000 miles away, the Parkland shooter, not an African-American kid, gets arrested peacefully after slaughtering so many kids with an assault rifle? That's the question too many of us ask. Again, the time is now to act, time for California to step up. The facts are the facts. The facts are young black men are 20 times more likely to be killed at the hands of a law enforcement officer than young Caucasian men. The time is now to revise this over 100-year-old law, which unfortunately too often justifies deadly force incidents. And this, I think, reasonable modernization, as Dr. Weber outlined, focuses on only when necessary as opposed to when reasonable, which is very different in the eyes of the beholder. This law, we think, will help prevent needless loss of life by having law enforcement agencies focus on increased training with de-escalation, with new officers going through the academy, but as well as existing police officers. It's time for justice for victims and families like the Clark family here, but like the Clark families all across California and our nation. This will help bring confidence to the public that we can be smarter and more humane with our policies. Bringing about justice is not easy, but this is a necessary step that we can enact this year in California. Thank you. I'd now like to bring up our Assembly member from Los Angeles, the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, Chris Holden.
Thank you, Assemblymember McCarty. As the chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, I stand before you today with my fellow members as well as representatives of the community to say that our hearts are heavy and we stand together with the family of Stephon Clark. Stephon was only 22 years old and in the backyard of his family's home when he was fatally shot by Sacramento police on March 18th. This tragedy is not a standalone incident. In fact, this tragedy only builds on the mountain of injustice that have occurred in this country at the hands of police. Before Stephon Clark, there was Oscar Grant, 22-year-old African-American man who was killed by police in Oakland, California, while lying face down on the ground in 2009. In 2014, it was Michael Brown and Tamar Rice, two children, were fatally shot by police while unarmed. In 2016, Alton Sterling and Philandro Castillo were both shot and killed by police. This short list of names does not begin to scratch the surface of the senseless violence we have seen in our community at the hands of police for living while black. How can these families seek justice without adequate framework to hold police accountable? How do they find peace when the men and women tasked with keeping us safe are not equipped to safely interact with our communities? African Americans in this country and in the great state of California feel a target is on their back by police and the justice system. African Americans are overwhelmingly the target of undue police scrutiny and subsequently police violence. We should no longer be the target practice or victims of a shoot first, ask questions later police force. Today, members of the Black Caucus, Assembly members Weber and McCarty, are announcing landmark legislation that will change the way police deploy lethal force. I'm proud to lend my voice in support and join in the effort, and we look forward to a successful conclusion of this important legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. We're fortunate today to have at least members of the Stephon Clark's family. We want just simply to acknowledge Mr. Raj Mani, who is the grandfather, who's here with us today. So thank you so very much for coming.
He's right.
Bring the microphone.
Your mic's right in front.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if this mic does much. It does. I'm sorry. Okay. So we're here to have Raj Mani, the grandfather of Stephon Clark, with us. Thank you so very much for attending today. Our hearts and prayers are with the family at this time. We have a number of individuals who are sponsors of the bill and who are supportive, as mentioned, and we'll hear from them at this time. We will begin with Lizzie Buchan with the ACLU. We'll ask each one who's listed on the agenda today to try to restrict themselves to 2 minutes and to introduce themselves and the organizations they represent.
Thank you. My name is Lizzie Buchan. I'm a legislative advocate with the ACLU, and I want to start by expressing my appreciation for everyone up here for leading the way on this truly landmark legislation. This is a long time coming, and it's clear that the community's call for action is being heard. This bill would change state law so that an officer can only use deadly force when it's necessary. Clearly, the current standard where they can use deadly force when they feel a serious threat isn't enough to prevent unnecessary deaths of members of the community, particularly people of color. It's given legal cover to the killings of Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, Jessica Williams, many, many other killings that have devastated communities and resulted in people feeling less safe. Because it's clear that the current law protects the police, not the people. It allows officers to kill community members when they had other options or when they're the ones who created the danger. This bill establishes that it's not enough that the officer perceived a threat. There had to have been no other alternatives to using deadly force. Deadly force can no longer be the first response to a perceived threat. It can only be the last resort. This bill also makes sure that officers are held accountable if they created the circumstances that made force necessary. So if they jumped in front of a moving vehicle, if they rushed in to confront a person instead of keeping their distance and calling for backup, it would no longer be legal for an officer to kill someone in those situations. Now, we understand that police officers often have to make split-second decisions. But we need to consider the fact that when a civilian is approached by a police officer who is armed, that civilian also has to make split-second decisions. They aren't trained, they can be confused, they might be panicked, they might be frightened. There might be a number of reasons why they won't behave exactly how the officer expects them to behave. Under current law, an officer can assume that they are armed and they can kill them if they flinch in a way that could be construed as dangerous or reaching for a weapon. So that is not right. The primary objective for using deadly force is safeguarding human life. This bill is a critical step in making sure that our laws reflect that goal and focus on protecting all of the people. Thank you.
So my name is Tanya Faison. I'm the founder of the Sacramento chapter of Black Lives Matter. So I want to kind of lift the names of folks that have not been named that are either from or live in Sacramento. Adrienne Ludd, 2015. 2016 was Dejan Fleno, Joseph Mann, and Jason King. In 2017, it was Armani Lee, Desmond Phillips, Lorenzo Cruz, James Nelson, Zatira Abraham, Ryan Ellis, Michael McIntyre. So these are folks that either live in or are from Sacramento that have been either abused or killed by law enforcement locally. There are a lot of people. So I'm really thankful for this legislation. I'm thankful that we're moving the needle in the right direction. I look forward to more legislation as well because we need to see repercussions and we need to see community oversight. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kat Brooks. I'm the co-founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project. I'm going to continue to uplift names. Shalene Tyndall was shot 3 times in his back by a BART police officer in Oakland, California in January. Ebony Madrigal was a 16-year-old pregnant teenager who was unarmed and gunned down with AR-15s in Hayward. Yvette Henderson, the 38-year-old mother and grandmother who was gunned down with an AR-15 in broad daylight. The list goes on and on and on. I've been doing this work for the better part of a decade, and I can't tell you how many families' hands I've held. And when they ask, well, where's the accountability? What if it was their child? Why has this happened again? And I haven't had an answer. Right? Well, I've had answers. I've had answers that mean that law enforcement is more protected than your average civilian walking down the street. I've had answers that means that law enforcement, you don't get the same information about law enforcement or whether or not they had a record before. There's all of these legislative things that protect our law enforcement, and family members repeatedly ask me, well, who protects us? California law enforcement has demonstrated without a doubt that they are not, on a large scale, capable of discerning when lethal force is necessary and when it is not, because too many of our loved ones have unnecessarily died. And far too often, they then move without accountability. So what is the incentive for them to stop? If you know that you can kill with impunity, if my child knows that every time she puts her hand in the candy jar, I'm not going to do anything but tell her not to do it again, she's going to keep putting her hand in the candy jar. I don't need to make something so serious into a trivial matter, but without accountability and transparency, we're never going to see the beginning to the end of this epidemic. This bill is not a be-all, end-all, but it is a critical step toward ensuring that officers think twice before engaging with our communities like they are in wartime combatant. I fear for my life is not a good enough excuse to kill our community members. What about compassionate policing? Adolfo Duarte, He cowered in the trunk of a car while San Francisco PD lobbed 99 bullets into that car. You haven't heard his name, but you should Google his name. And to the man's point earlier, but at the same time, you can go to the Parkland shooter who you know has a weapon, who you know is okay to use it, and he gets there alive. Dylan Roof, you can take to Burger King on his way to jail. But they handcuff our dead black and brown bodies before even attempting to render medical aid. Enough is enough. So I am honored to stand here with the other folks that are supporting this bill. We've been on the ground for the last decade doing this work. We continue to be on the ground doing this work. We're glad to see legislators moving along with us. Christine?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christine Sotaferi. I'm the Chief of Staff for San Francisco District Attorney George Gascon. I'm honored to be here today on his behalf with the legislators Weber and McCarthy and those that have joined on this important effort. D. Gascon is uniquely qualified in the area of policing and police use of force. Before becoming our elected district attorney, he spent 30 years as a police officer, beginning first as a patrol officer in South LA and ending as the assistant chief in Los Angeles before becoming the police chief in 2 American cities. That led to his appointment as our district attorney. And in all of those capacities, he's had the unique opportunity to evaluate policing and police use of force, both in the situations personally, having to make decisions in dangerous situations about whether to employ lethal force, to training members of the Los Angeles Police Department about the appropriate use of force, and disciplining officers when they have fallen outside of those boundaries. And now in his capacity as district attorney, evaluating those uses of force for criminal conduct. And what all of those experiences have shown him is that there is a way to reduce the use of lethal force without jeopardizing officer safety. That we can achieve both goals and protect the lives of everybody involved in a dangerous incident with improved policies and improved laws in this area. There's no doubt, if we look around the country, we can see numerous examples of this. Police districts that have changed their use of force policies have seen these outcomes, have seen reduced force incidents, and have seen officer injuries reduced in those same communities. This is a win. This is a good thing for everybody in these incidents. And if we can implement laws that are safer and more humane, why wouldn't we? The community has asked us to review these matters. They're demanding change in this space. And as the elected district attorney, it is incumbent upon Mr. Gascon and others in positions like this to hear that call and to do our work to deliberate and debate a way to move forward that is safer and more humane. Hopeful that others in policing and prosecution will join us, engage in the conversation about how we can protect human life, protect police officers, and enhance public safety. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon, and I'd like to thank you, Assemblywoman Weber, as well as Assemblywoman McCarthy. I think this is a great first step. I am Betty Williams, president of the Sacramento branch of the NAACP. One of the things that the branch has been looking for from the very beginning, even with the initial AB 32, that I don't know, that we were looking for oversight or some kind of action from the state of California. The Sacramento branch of the NAACP met immediately with Chief Hahn. And as a result, one of the many things that we asked, we wanted an independent oversight. We wanted an independent investigation. And the community would no longer stand for them looking at themselves to investigate these type of issues. And for individuals like our assembly have put together this piece to make sure that there's another extra eye, there's another extra arm to overlook issues like this. We have a community that's watching everyone very carefully on a national level. And to take this type of step this soon talks about the type of character and the individuals that we have that are creating law for us. And so I would like to applaud you for this first step in making this happen. And so that it creates a win-win, in my opinion, for the adult community and law enforcement. This is something that's absolutely needed, and I think that if you ever need any help with the NAACP, we have other laws and sponsors that we would like to engage with you regarding law enforcement, simply because there were just too many issues that came out of this. The newly became the investigation of the backyard, the foot patrol, all of those things that NAACP is looking at. So thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of this issue.
Before I say my name, I want to lift up, alongside of folks that just did, lifted up some names of some people that their names can't be lifted up by themselves. Scott Sr., Terry Amons, Shalon Smith, Thompson Newell, Primitivo Rodriguez, Alejandro Valdez, Andy Bowe, Shalene Tiddell, Ronna Foster, Stephon Clark. My name is Les Simmons. It's time that we bring it into the culture of policing, police killings in California. People of color and poor white relatives, and particularly black men, are living under the tyranny of a vicious policing system that murders us, steals our lives, and traumatizes our communities. We must end the senseless killings of our family. It is immoral, unconstitutional, and it is inhumane, and we demand an end to police violence in California. As a leader of Sacramento ACT, the Build Black Coalition, in Pico, California, we stand in support of Assemblymember Weber's legislation that updates California's use of force laws and brings accountability to law enforcement agencies that are out of control. This bill is a step in the right direction to ensure that law enforcement are better equipped to serve and are met with the appropriate accountability when policy is not followed. As a pastor, I see too much blood in the streets. As a community of faith, we are called to stand up for those who are oppressed, and in this case, our loved ones being murdered. We must have strong leaders like Assemblymember Weber and Kevin McCarty that will stand up for policies and protocols that are killing our sons, killing our daughters, and killing Stephon Clark. We need a new use of force laws now. And we call out those in the state capitol to live in your calling and bring justice for the people. Dr. King said the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is my own government. I cannot be silent. We cannot at all. We will not be silent. Thank you.
I want to thank those who came here today and who have joined us in this effort to pass the bill. AB 931 is the number of the bill that you'll see soon. We'll put across the desk. And we are excited about the fact that we have a broad coalition of individuals who are greatly concerned about this issue. I think we all know that this is not a new issue in African American communities. Probably with the advent of cell phones and videos, it has now become apparent, what we have known all of our lives, that there's a special treatment that occurs when an officer meets an African American. I've known that all my life. I've seen it in my uncles and my grandfathers. I've read it in the poetry. I can remember as a student at UCLA, I read a poem called Black Mother Praying by Owen Dodson. And it talks about her watching the light being snatched from the eye of a young man. And then she was a black mother who was going to stand with her son. And at the time when I read the poem, I thought it was a poem written in the 60s because I'm a kid of the 60s, the radical era. And the more I learned that that poem was written in the 1940s by Owen Dodson. And so it says very clearly that the issue that we face is an old issue that we've known about for many, many years. And it is deeply rooted in this society. And the only way we're going to get at it is to be honest about the issue we face, to be honest about the issues that are there, and to address them head on in order to bring the kind of reform that's necessary. We know that our police officers have the capacity to do this because they do it every day in other communities. And so it's not like it's something strange and unusual. We see it all the time in other communities. So what we have to do is make sure that that knowledge that they have, the skills they have, is now applied to the African American that they meet every day on the streets. So we are here today as legislators, but we're also here as mothers and fathers and concerned citizens for fear for our children and our grandchildren and our neighbors and our friends, to make sure that they have the protection of the law, that they can look at their officers as friends, as people to call in time of trouble. And as I pointed out, because we have a fear of calling police officers, but that it will make a small situation worse, we then don't have the protection of the law in black communities. And we need to have that protection. So we believe AB 931 is the first step in changing the laws of California, changing the attitudes in California, and that we will see the kind of results that we've seen in other places when this has been implemented. I want to thank you for coming. We will now open it up for a few questions, and then after that you can have one-on-one interviews with different individuals. Are there any questions?
Dr. Weber,
yes.
In your outreach on this, have you been able to get any support from Republicans and or law enforcement?
You know, this is a very quick issue. I assume that we will get some support from law enforcement. We have our district attorney here from San Francisco, but it's a new bill that they haven't had the chance to see. I think they will see that that the philosophy behind it is clear and should be something that most of us thought already existed. We thought that the use of lethal force was the last thing that a person was doing, and not the first. So I think what will happen is that we will get that support because this is a reasonable position based on research and based upon research of the policing and what is effective not only in saving lives of the citizens, but really in saving lives of police officers as well. Any other question? Yes.
Isn't there reasonableness standard set by the United States Supreme Court? And if so, can California have a different standard? Would that set up a lawsuit with the federal government?
ACLU will answer that.
Yes, so it is the constitutional standard, but we can have a higher standard than the Constitution. That's the floor, because it's about the rights of the person who's killed by the officer. And so we can have a higher standard protecting their Fourth Amendment rights.
Do you anticipate it would become subject to a lawsuit if it is signed into law?
Well, there are police departments that have incorporated aspects of these policies into their policies, and I don't believe that there have been any challenges there. Well, we know that so there's many agencies that have that require de-escalation. There are agencies that require officers to exhaust reasonable alternatives. San Francisco Police Department, the commission has approved a use of force policy that is actually more restrictive than this. So we are seeing examples, and as Dr. Weber mentioned, these come from the recommendations of legal experts and policing experts. So these are, yeah.
What do you say to those police officers who would argue that if they wait when they see that flinch, that they could lose their life or somebody else could lose their life?
I think our district attorney has addressed that issue, that all the research shows that people are actually safer, and the assessment should be done before they're obviously facing someone that's there. We're not saying people can't use lethal force, but we're saying that there are oftentimes other alternatives that can be used. I think we saw that even with just the video that we saw last week, that there were other alternatives. People were not facing each other. People were behind the house. They could have employed a number of things that are there. And so we're pushing those issues in terms of making sure that the other alternatives are looked at first, rather than just lethal force. Concerning our sister with the Constitution, I think most of us recognize the fact that when the Constitution was written, it didn't include a whole lot. We had to change the Constitution to make it a more perfect union and a fairer nation. So African Americans have never been afraid of challenging the Constitution. So I just want to make that very clear that if for some bizarre reason this happens to go to the Supreme Court, we are confident that we have not in this nation always been perfect and right in the treatment of others. And that if it requires something of that effort, we are committed to doing that because it is about time.
Yes. For the DA's office, can you give us an example of a case that you did not prosecute under the current standard but could under this new standard?
So San Francisco has never had a prosecution.
Yes.
San Francisco is not unique like most cities around this country. We've never had a prosecution of a police officer for use of deadly force in the line of duty. The legal standard is very permissive about an officer's opportunity to use deadly force in situations. And it often takes a final frame analysis. What happened in the moment the weapon was fired? And as Dr. Weber, Assemblymember Weber indicated, there are many steps in many shootings that precede the use of force that most departments train their officers around that can help eliminate the situation. But our current legal standard, as we've seen nationwide, very few police officers are charged with the illegal use of deadly force, and even fewer are convicted. And there are many factors in that, but the law is certainly one.
Right, but is there a case in San Francisco that you could, under this standard, have prosecuted at this standard?
So I think all of our declinations for prosecution are posted on our website, so you could certainly review the factual scenarios in any one of those and review our application of the law to those facts and determine for yourselves whether you thought this would be cured by the change in law.
Can you sort of outline the standard that you now that the San Francisco now has, and whether
we're going to talk about AB 931, and I think if you want to interview the district attorney in San Francisco, you can. He would have been here today, but I think he's been impaneled on the jury.
He's on the jury.
He's on the jury. I don't know what case would put a district attorney on the jury, but anyway, I was a judge and a lawyer. He would never do that. But you can always have a conversation with him, and I'm sure he will be even more involved with this bill as it moves forward through the various committees in terms of support. I want to thank you all for coming. I appreciate you being here today. This is going to be a journey. Obviously, AB 931 is going to be heard fairly soon. And we are confident that given the situations that's in California, that as usual, California should lead the way as a state in terms of changing the direction. If California can't do it, who can? And that's the position we have always in California, and we plan to employ that with regards to AB 931. Thank you so very much for coming.